This is a new solo exhibition of mine called Drawn to the Edge. And the reason it's called Drawn to the Edge is I have travelled and lived in many different countries across the world, and I've kind of come to a very strong conclusion that I really need to be at the edge of a landmass. You know, physically I feel it, emotionally I feel it. I just feel very connected with water, and I don't like the feeling of being landlocked. So that has provided a theme for the show. And this is one of the pieces that is one of the principal pieces in the show. It's called At the Edge of Autumn. And it was really the end product from quite a lot of drawing that I did up on Gonzales Hill, where the observatory is. Looking out onto Gonzales Bay, looking out to the Chinese cemetery, really a 180 view that you can achieve up there. And that particular piece, it looks out onto the Gonzales Fairfield area. I like all the tonal recession that you can get in that area, and to my Scottish eyes, I'm used to a very different quality of light. So I noticed that very quickly when I moved here, that even although other people from different parts of Canada might perceive the sky to be quite grey here, to my Scottish eyes it's actually extremely bright. In fact, I tend to wear sunglasses most of the time because we're used to about half the amount of sunshine in Scotland as we get here. And so that has a big effect on my palette. I've noticed myself choosing much brighter colours and really not getting enough of colour. I'm getting brighter and brighter with every painting. Maybe apart from this one, in the middle band of the painting that's become quite colourful, but just to emphasise this feeling of recession and sort of layers and layers into the distance, it becomes quite pale. And in the last 5 minutes, I really wrestled with painting for weeks. I went through so many different transitions, but in the last 5 minutes I decided I needed yet another layer, so I've added all of these birds on the wire just for a sort of playful touch and to bring the eye forward. So yeah, that's one of the biggest pieces that I have here. I have many other pieces, but there's should we move over to painting here? Bright Sea was one of the first paintings I did in this series as well. Again, it was the product of having done quite a bit of drawing up on Gonzales Hill. And it's called Bright Sea, and the reason it's called Bright Sea was because to my eyes, again, it just seems so overwhelmingly glossy and silvery and almost white with the sunshine bouncing from the ocean. And I like the way that it produced a very silhouetted effect almost on the landmass there. This is the Chinese cemetery, and I've just had a little bit of a playful approach here, almost cubist approach in the centre here. Continuing on a water theme, the most recent piece that I've done in this whole collection is actually a Scottish piece, and I'm not actually feeling at all homesick, but I just suddenly realised there was a big connection between a lot of photographs I had taken in Scotland before I moved here a year and a half ago and what I was doing now, and again it was water. So I've actually started a new little offshoot collection based on the east coast of Scotland. A lot of the harbour villages, harbour towns that are on the east coast are very connected. They're only about 5 minutes apart, each with their own character, but just maybe aesthetically a little bit different to what we're seeing here. Most of the buildings are very old stone. A lot of the cottages you would see there are from around about the 1700s. So a slightly different take, but it's still about texture, it's about colour, it's about movement. And for me, when I'm thinking about colour, I'm being really quite subjective rather than literal. It's not at all important to me that I produce an accurate representation of what is actually there, but it's more about the sensation of being in a place and what it feels like. Most of my work is about cityscape because I'm a city girl. I was born in Glasgow, a big city. I really connect with that type of environment. And for a lot of people, they find the city quite a foreboding place. For me, it's just a very exciting environment, and I tend to dwell on the atmosphere, the possibility of connection with people. I like the buzz of cities and the dynamism as well, the fact that they're just not static, they're always moving. So even if you stand still, you still can feel quite exhausted being in a city because there's so much motion around you. So really the colour that I use is a heightened palette. It's beyond reality, but I hope that people will take from that I have been excited being in that environment. I wanted to just mention this painting here because it has maybe one of the most extreme slants, most extreme perspectives on the buildings. I don't know if it's immediately recognisable to people, but this is actually the Empress on Belleville Street. It's called Blossoms on Belleville, and I painted it during the cherry blossom season last year. But you'll see that the building almost has a tilting feeling. It's not supposed to look like it's been in an earthquake. It's just really, I do study perspective and I understand perspective, I teach perspective, but what I'm trying to convey is, again, this sense of excitement and motion in a city. I think it's my tendency to exaggerate about everything anyway, so I exaggerate the colour, I exaggerate texture, and perspective is just another of those things that I'm trying to emphasise. And if I feel when you're painting, if you're going to say something, you might as well say it loud so that people really understand what you're trying to convey. And probably what you leave out is more important than what you leave in. But I like the balance between the natural environment that you see in Victoria and the built environment, which again is a little bit different to what I'm used to in Glasgow, my home city. There are a lot of trees in my home city as well, but in Victoria it's just really more emphasised, this synergy between natural lines, organic lines, and rectilinear lines, and I'm finding that quite exciting. My very favourite places in Victoria is Lojo, Lower Johnston area. It's an area that I just think you couldn't possibly walk down that street and feel depressed. It's a very uplifting place to be. I'm thinking really that where I come from in Scotland, you would rarely get planning permission to paint buildings in wild colours. So for me, this particular street feels a little bit naughty. It feels a little bit adventurous and rebellious. I'm constantly surprised every time I go down there that it's been allowed to happen. And this is how I'd like to see the world. In my home city, when I'm painting buildings in Scotland, I have to invent the colour in my head, but here I'm finding that the colour actually exists. So that's very exciting to me. This piece down here is related to the watercolour above, and I thought it was a shame that whenever I'd seen photographs of Lojo, that it had a very extreme perspective just because of the nature of the street, and because of that, you wouldn't really be able to see all the individual buildings. So I've called this Lojo Unfolded, and I've actually just stood in front of every single building and flattened it out to an impossible view. So it was a lot of fun to do.